This episode of the Linux Action Show is brought to you by DigitalOcean and by Ting. Go to last.ting.com and save $25 off your first device or your first month of service. Welcome to Linux Action Show, episode 314. My name is Chris.
My name is Matt.
Hey, Matt, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Are you ready for me to tell folks about the big show today?
Oh, definitely.
All right, well, coming up on this week's episode of the Linux Action Show, we'll be talking with Jonathan Thomas from the OpenShot Foundation, or I'm going to start over. That's horrible.
That's good.
Horrible, Matt. Horrible. Because it's not a foundation, right?
No, it's a company.
Is it?
It's an LLC.
Okay, all right. So, yeah, all right. I shouldn't say that.
Just say OpenShot project.
I'll just say whatever the hell I want. OpenShot, hot shot. Okay, now this is for real. Here we go. Hold on. Let's hold on. You know what? Hold on. You know what I got to say?
Get it out of here.
That's what I say to that.
That's it.
Holy crap. Okay, here we go. Linux Action Show 314 and a 3 and a 2. Welcome to the Linux Action Show, episode 314. My name is Chris.
My name is Matt.
Hey, Matt, good morning to you.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Yourself?
Are you ready for me to tell folks about the big show? All right.
Yeah.
Here's what we have coming up. Just in a little bit, Jonathan Thomas from the OpenShot project will be joining us to discuss how the OpenShot project is progressing since he went on the crowdfunding campaign. And we'll just get an update from him in general and see what he's been working on. And I think that's going to be a good talk because we've talked a lot about media production under Linux, so we've got a ton of questions. Plus, we'll be pulling from our live chat room. Then in the news segment, we're going to talk about what has turned out to be the most controversial thing that happened in the Linux landscape this week. That's a new game with a dirty secret. So we're going to dig into that. Plus, we'll also discuss a few other tidbits in the news, and I'll eat my hat regarding Chrome on Linux. I'll come clean. And in the feedback segment, we've got some cool projects the community's working on and some really interesting early results from a poll we ran in Linux Unplugged last week about the audience's favorite desktop environment.
Interesting findings.
Yes. But you know what we have first? As is tradition, it is our picks.
Right.
And our Runs Linux this week is called BAT. It is an airborne wind turbine, and it runs Linux.
Oh, that sounds awesome. It sounds very James Bond.
Yeah, this is one of these stories where it's like the year 2014. Here, I'll play a little bit of this video that's going to get us taken down from YouTube.
Out of reach.
See, look right there, Matt. You see it?
The world
yeah.
times over. And so there's been a bit of a quest to say, what way can we harness these winds that are out of reach?
So, what they're working on right here is a turbine that is in sort of like a blimp almost. It goes up into the sky. It's controlled on the ground by Linux machines. It's one part drone, one part blimp, and it takes the turbine aspect of it, puts it up in the blimp, goes higher up into the sky where there's steadier winds. Because one of the problems with the ground winds is that they're sort of all over the map depending on the terrain you're at and the overall weather. But you go higher up and you have much more consistent wind. So they put these things up and they're also, as you might expect, much more portable. Now they do take about
to say in rural areas, man, that'd be just a ticket.
Or like when you finally go have like your bailout cabin where you go live up in a mountain somewhere, you could take this thing with you because it actually fits in one shipping container. One reasonable size shipping container because it inflates. It takes about a day to set up, they say, and then you get it up there, and it can generate a fair amount of water. Of power.
Yeah, that would
water,
be cool. Yeah. But no, it's so big. I could see why it would take a day to get it up and out. And
put it up to about 1,000, 2,000 feet.
And from its size, I would assume it generates a fair amount of electricity.
Yeah, it's in the article here. I'll drill down and I'll grab that. But yeah, one bat. Here we go. It can power for more than 12 homes. While it's going. Yeah, it's pretty good.
That's actually really
so they're
good.
Computer controlled, requiring no onboard pilots, no operators because the Linux box even adjusts their flight stuff. No expensive infrastructure such as electrical grids or station required. They're pretty portable, as all things considered. So you could see how you could also take this to an area maybe that's had some sort of natural disaster.
Right.
You deploy a bunch of these things. You get the Linux computer down on the ground controlling it. They're portable enough to pack two. You can pack two of them into a shipping container.
Oh, that's handy. So there's 24 houses right there.
No heavy machinery required to set the thing up. It does take helium, so you're going to have some helium to make the donut-shaped body fill up. And then, of course, you have to tether it down to a computer on the ground. It's not wireless. So you have to have a machine at the base. That's maybe one limitation. But maybe with a Raspberry Pi and some sort of hardy weather case
or
with
some
a battery.
Nikola Tesla action going on. You just wirelessly send that electricity back and forth. I don't know.
And here's what's great: existing federal rules allow the bat to fly at nearly 2,000 feet right now because that's below pretty much all flight patterns.
Right.
So the turbines include a safety beacon as well to warn passing aircraft, so they also broadcast there.
Okay. Well, that helps, especially if you're on a paraglider and you decide to go swinging by something and it's like, oh crap.
I totally want one for my cabin. I really want one.
Oh, definitely. Oh, you're going cabin. That's going to go more like secret compound. But yeah.
Well, I mean, what are you going to have at the center of that compound, Matt?
Oh, I absolutely am going to have something floating up.
Maybe and you could have it, and maybe you could even have a few homes. You could have like a whole commune of people come join you. You could have 12 homes with one of these things.
There you go.
Plus, if you do it smart, like you stick to laptops and low-powered devices, I think you could make it stretch. Maybe you could even get to 13 or 14 homes, Matt.
Works for me.
All right, well, before we go any further, I want to thank our first sponsor this week, and that is DigitalOcean. Wow, have I told you about DigitalOcean? I think I have, but if you're not familiar, let me tell you a little bit about them. DigitalOcean is simple cloud hosting dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way to spin up a cloud server. Now, our audience gets this done about somewhere in the 40-second range. It ranges between 42 seconds and about 55 seconds. Most folks get a cloud server spun up over DigitalOcean in about 55 seconds. And here's the best part. Pricing plans start at only $5 per month. That gets you 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, 1 CPU, and a terabyte of transfer for $5.
Jeez.
Now, here's the best part, Matt. If you use our promo code, last May, and come on, May's almost over, so let's give this a good plug. Last May, when you're over at DigitalOcean, you can get a $10 credit. You can try out that $5 rig. Get ready for this. See, this is math. Because you're getting a $10 credit, and that rig costs $5. So guess what? 2 months for free when you use the promo code last. 2 months for free, Matt.
You gotta love that, right?
And the thing is it's not just SSDs by themselves. They're on amazing hardware connected to tier 1 bandwidth in data centers all over the world that are class 1 data centers. They have data center locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, and Amsterdam. And the best part is all of it is wrapped in this interface that's simple and intuitive to use. I'm amazed at the amount of power they've managed to harness in such an intuitive and simple interface. And they have an API where you can replicate that interface on a much larger scale. So if you want to do some scripting or deploy an application that uses that or take advantage of applications the community has already written, you can. Because a lot of people have said that API isn't just simple, it's beautiful too. And when a developer sees themselves a beautiful API, well, they just can't resist. So go over to DigitalOcean.com and try a droplet right now. You can also do higher end rigs. They have a very simple and straightforward pricing structure, so it's obvious to you, and that you don't feel like there's any ambiguity in the pricing system that you get on a lot of these cloud systems, where there's some of the bigger ones out there where it's more based on how much CPU usage and transfer, and you kind of end up with a surprise bill at the end of the month. Right. Whereas with DigitalOcean, it's broken out very clearly. It's a fixed cost, and it's super reasonable. And the best part, it's all running on top of awesome Linux technologies, sitting on those SSD drives. So go over to DigitalOcean.com and use the promo code LASTMAY when you check out. Let's give the month of May a showing for DigitalOcean, and a really big thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the Linux Action Show. Love that service. And I'm going to kind of tie it into one of my picks here in a couple of minutes.
Nice.
But first, before we get to that pick, I want to talk about something a little fun, something a little simple. We're going to be talking with Jonathan a little bit about OpenShot. Mm-hmm. This is about making movies and stuff, Matt. But what if you just want to do a little goofing around on, maybe you want to do like a meme picture, something that's almost like Microsoft Paint style, right? But of course, we don't have the wonderful Microsoft Paint on Linux. Yep. So I want to tell you about, I'm going to call it Pinta. Because it kind of sounds like Pinta. Yeah. It's painting. It's simple. It's straightforward. I got it installed here too. In fact, I'll launch it.
So if you would check it out.
Would you like to see it, Matt? Yeah. Would you like to see it? So this is it right here.
Oh yeah, that's if you're into Microsoft Paint, this is like right up your alley.
Yeah, you're right back at home here. So should we go open up? Let's see. We'll go open up. This is the image I made to do the Linux Action Show is live. Yeah, a nice, cool, like little looking into the future glass.
Very cool.
Yeah, because I figured we're going to look into the future and talk with Jonathan, so I was inspired by that. And you could see if I wanted to meme this up, right, I could go take some red paint right here, and now I could start writing something on here. So it's very much like you have paint, only the kind of, it's almost... It's like one, if you're familiar on Windows, and I'm just trying to equate it to things people might be familiar with on Windows, but it's almost more of an equivalent to Paint.net than it is to Microsoft Paint.
Okay, so there's more functionality.
Yeah,
more
it doesn't have
features.
as much functionality as Paint.net, but it's got like layers. It's got motion blur and some effects that regular Paint doesn't have on Windows. It's as easy to use as MS Paint with a lot of the really nice features from Paint.net. And on Windows, honestly, Paint.net is one of the better applications out there.
Oh.
So there you go. It's called Panita. And version 1.6 is what I tried, and they had an update earlier this year. You can go check it out, and I'll have a link to that in the show notes. And it's in the Arch repo. I'm sure it's in probably most distributions repo.
That's a good option if you want to check out like a Paint-like alternative.
Yeah, and if you just want something where I'm going to pull in this photo really quick, I'm going to make a funny meme, or I'm going to make a funny thing, like I'm going to put Matt's head on Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? You could use that really quick.
But it gives you a nice alternative workflow to, say, GIMP or something like that. It gives you a nice, just an alternative.
Exactly. GIMP's great, and GIMP's more advanced. This is like, I don't need as much as GIMP, but I want a little more than like what the photo viewer built into my desktop environment gives me.
Pinta is good.
All right, Matt, now I'm going to step into the line of fire, and I'm going to tell everybody to drop SSH and switch to Mosh.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's got a cool name.
This is my spotlight for this week. And you can't actually drop SSH because Mosh actually sits on top of SSH. But I was just trying to get everybody's attention. So what is Mosh? Mosh is a remote terminal application that allows roaming with intermittent internet connectivity. I thought the best way to kind of explain it would be to have one of the developers. It's a little long, but it's such an awesome tool. And if you guys have SSH sessions on your mobile device, or if you're like me, where maybe you're working at your office and then you have your SSH'd into a server, you sleep the laptop, you go home, you want to resume that session, and you just want to be able to open the laptop and have everything pick up right where you left off, even though you're at a different IP, even though your machine's been sleeping maybe for an hour while you commuted. Mosh makes that possible. It's coming out of the MIT Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, and it's really neat. I've been using it for a couple of days. I'll let the developer explain it, and then I'll tell you about my experiences. And this was at a conference that was, let's see, last in 2012. So it's been around for a little bit.
Okay.
New mobile shell. It's like SSH, this guy, except it supports roaming. It lets you have intermittent connectivity, and it produces a much better user interface. So let's talk about sort of the status quo. We're not going to get into the prehistory, but who here has used SSH to connect from one computer to another? All right, let's call that everybody. So we all know about SSH. It uses TCP. It connects the two computers together. Whatever you type at the local terminal gets sent via TCP to the remote host, and whatever the application prints comes back to your screen. All the user interface comes from the server, including whatever you type. You have to wait for those packets to go to the network and back to even see what you're typing. So this was great in 1995, but it's produced a lot of problems based on what's happened with the internet over the last 17 years, which is a lot. You can't roam with SSH. If you're at work and you put your laptop to sleep and you bring it home, you don't have your connection anymore. You can't even roam from one Wi-Fi network to another, or from Wi-Fi to cellular. And SSH, because it runs over TCP, responds poorly to packet loss. So if you're on one of these terrible networks, like on Amtrak, you really can't expect to use SSH. We argue that the root cause of this is that this octet stream, which SSH sends, it's really the wrong layer of abstraction for this kind of application. If you're the client, you want to see the latest screen from the application. What is the current contents of the screen? If you have an interruption in your connectivity for, let's say, 5 seconds, you really just want to know, what should I be looking at now? But SSH doesn't understand what it's sending, so it has to send you everything the application has printed out. It could be megabytes just to get you to that current screen state. And TCP, of course, fills up all these network buffers, so then you're getting all this output from a runaway process, and your Control-C, this is not a new problem, I think, to anyone here, and then it keeps coming, and this is just terrible. And trying to type, when you have these huge delays, today's networks, it's not like, the ARPANET, which was much faster. Today we've measured with Verizon's top product, their 4G LTE, we've measured delays of 40 seconds round trip time when you have one TCP download happening. So trying to type where you only see what you're typing 40 seconds later, that's terrible. So here's what we built. We built two things. The first is a new protocol to synchronize not octet streams, but objects. It's object synchronization protocol. And the goal is to have the lowest latency possible. In the presence of client roaming, you can put it to sleep for an hour or 10 hours, fly to Europe, wake it up again. You can have a lossy network path. We try and do our best to synchronize abstract objects. And number two, we use that protocol to build this mobile shell application, Mosh. that has a local user interface. So when you type, you see what you typed immediately.
And I want to pick it up from right there because this is the interesting part. So when you type, traditional SSH sessions wait for the server to acknowledge that it received the packet, and then it displays back in your session. Where with Mosh, it immediately echoes it back, and then it on the back end figures out if the server received the packet or not. Oh. So what I have here is kind of interesting. This is an SSH session to, wait, no, not that one. This one is an SSH session to my DigitalOcean droplet that has been running now for about a day and a half. Okay. I started it yesterday here at the studio. I SSH'd in, and then at the end of the day, I closed the lid on my Bonobo. I put it to sleep. I took it home. I played The Witcher 2 for a while at home with this running in the background. Put it to sleep again, brought it into the studio again. So I'm changing IPs, I'm changing locations. The machine's going offline for several hours and then coming back online. And every time I resume, my Mosh session picks up right where I left off. And it's what's cool about it is you don't really have to learn anything new. You install Mosh on the server side, you install Mosh on the client side. When you do a Mosh connection to the server, Mosh answers and actually does SSH on the back end, and then it just connects the two up and sort of provides the go-between. Nice. And I've noticed a bit of a performance improvement because certain things are displaying locally faster. It feels more like I'm working on a local system than on a remote system.
I can imagine. I mean, I love the fact that you're not having to wait for that stupid latency because, I mean, that's just,
yeah, it feels much more modern. And the other thing I like about it, too, is there's an Android client out there that it can integrate with. It already has support for Mosh, and the chat room's been talking about it. It's called Juice SSH, a nice SSH client. I'm really kind of one of the best SSH clients for Android, and I have a link to that in the show notes. There's also a Chrome app that you can install in the Chrome web browser that is a Mosh SSH client. And so what's neat about this is you could essentially just have this running every time you have the Chrome browser running. This could be running and you have an SSH session open or whatever it is.
I kind of like that.
Yeah, and then it would work on a Chromebook as well and things like that. So
very cool.
Called Mosh, M-O-S-H. I don't know. Don't flame me, but it looks pretty neat.
Well, I think based on its benefit, I mean, it's allowing you to, log in remotely, doing exactly what you need to do in a better, more efficient way. I don't know how that would possibly be negative.
Well, SSH has a long history, and this doesn't totally replace SSH. It sort of extends it and makes it better, and it's great for my workflow since I almost always have a connection open to that droplet doing something, and so it's nice to just know that I can move my laptop and that connection just stays. That's a really cool thing because, otherwise what I'd always end up doing
is... Does it work with like X forwarding, things like that?
It doesn't.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
I remember back in the day I used to play with that. It really didn't.
Yeah, I don't think it does.
Okay.
But it does do, like, it's worth reading because they've also gone through and identified some of the things that are wrong with traditional terminals and they've fixed some of it.
Yeah.
And they've worked to make sure that, like, you don't have a broken experience on all the different terminal emulators out there, including the OS X one and all that stuff. So Mosh, and you can find it at mosh.mit.edu or a link in the show notes.
Well, I'll tell you, I think for like a DigitalOcean droplet or any type of server situation, that is just, it's a must-have as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and like I think I'm going to set it up here at the studio so I can always have a session open to the studio server. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of for me a bit of a game changer because that would be the first thing I'd always do when I get home is I'd open up my terminal and resume my connection.
Exactly.
So I'm like, hey, I don't have to worry about it now. Now that feels like the future. So thanks, Mosh. At least I appreciate it. All right, Matt, let's do the news.
Hey, it's the news, and this episode is brought to you by
Ting.com. Matt, Ting is mobile that makes sense. My mobile service provider and Matt's mobile service provider. Still rocking the Nexus 5 and the Note 2. Very, very happy with the Nexus 5. I could see myself, if I wasn't such a phone hound, I could see myself living on this phone for years. So why am I so happy? A huge part of that is because Ting. Ting is really something that just makes sense, and here's why. No contracts, no early termination fees, and you only pay for what you use. It's a flat $6 per month, and then it's just your usage on top of that. Ting takes your minutes, your message, your megabytes, whatever bucket you fall into, that's what you pay, and then it's just like applicable taxes. Boom, you're done. So it's very straightforward because that also includes like, hey, you want hotspot, you want tethering, check the box, Holmes. Hey, you want picture message, you want your text messaging, do it, because it's just paid for your usage. You don't have to have some sort of special plan, and then Ting wraps it all up with a crazy great dashboard that makes just having a good overview of where you're at and managing your account really straightforward. Here's how I want you to get started. Go over to last.ting.com. Why? Because I'm asking you to. That's why. No, go to last.ting.com because that lets them know that you heard about it right here on the Linux Action Show. Plus, that'll get you $25 off your first Ting device, which then you will own outright. That's another great thing about Ting devices. And if you've already got a phone you want to bring with you, like maybe the HTC One or the iPhone 5 or the iPhone 4 or 4S, if you go to last.ting.com, it'll take $25 off your first device. The other thing I love about Ting is they're keeping it real. They are Android fans, and they've taken over the app picks for me. And Kyra's here with Image Shrink.
In the words of our local brewery, do one thing really, really well. I'm Kyra, and this is Ting's App of the Week. Image Shrink is a simple app that lets you resize your photos before sharing them with friends or across your social media channels. This comes in handy if you're looking to save on mobile data or you need to send a picture of a certain size. Image Shrink isn't used by opening the app. It only displays the settings menu. Here, you can choose the image size and image quality, along with default apps and deletion options. There are 2 different ways you can resize and compress a photo using Image Shrink. Find the photo in your gallery, share with Image Shrink, choose your image size, and send to the desired channel. Or, when attaching a file from inside an app, choose Image Shrink, Gallery, select your photo, and pick your image size. And remember, your resized pics are stored in a separate directory and won't overwrite your original snaps. You can delete the shrunken images at any time inside Image Shrink's settings menu. Image Shrink is also great if you're in a weak network area, because you can upload a lower quality version of the image much quicker. You can find the light version of this app in the Google Play Store, or for an extra $2 you can buy the paid version with a few extra features. I'm Kyra, thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe to our channel for future app reviews.
You know what I love about that? Is that's like a power pro tip. Like if you're in an area that's low signal or something like that, you can still get the picture out. And you know, if that doesn't give you a little clue about how cool the folks at Ting are, you know what else might give you a little clue? No-hold customer service. If you call them between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern at 1-855-TING-FTW, a real Canadian answers the phone, and they are empowered to solve your problems. So get started. Go to last.ting.com.
Ish.
And a really big thank you to Ting for sponsoring the Linux Action Show.
Good stuff. Good tips. I mean, I think that's the real takeaway. It's not only you got a YouTube channel with some really great tips, but I mean, they're helping you to get the most out of your phone.
Power users.
Yes.
All right, Matt. So I want to start with, surprisingly, the big controversy this week. It started.
Oh my God!
Everybody got really excited. The Witcher 2 was officially announced for Linux. Now this is a really popular game that came out a couple of years ago on Windows, and then came out like last year on the consoles when they finally managed to get the frame rate above 20 frames per second. And then now this week it lands on Linux. And I got to tell you, I jumped right on it because they had an 80% off sale going on Steam. So I think I picked it up for like $5.
So yeah, I mean at that point that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah. Right? However, this is where the Linux community got a little upset. Because so far, it's like, hey, check it out. A game we've all wanted. Beautiful graphics. 80% off. Coming to Linux. Let's celebrate. Everybody goes and buys it and then gets really upset when it quickly becomes revealed that the quality of the Witcher 2 port, if you could call it a port, is a bit upsetting to many Linux gamers. It turns out the Witcher 2 port is basically using a wrapper layer for its Linux compatibility rather than being a full-blown native Linux port.
Oh.
It's not exactly wine. It's using a technology called Eon by virtual programming. They say they've established a robust technology known as Eon, which was created from the ground up for gaming. It's fully native implementation of essential Windows technologies, developed with support for our closest relationship with Fortune 500 partners and software technology companies. And the idea is I think in a lot of ways you could probably equate it to wine, custom built just for that game. So they look at every like API call that game makes, you know, every graphics call, and they add a little shafting here and there to like make this graphics call work a little smoother.
Okay.
And then they prop it up, they make it a Linux executable, they slap in front of it a native Linux config screen, and then once it fires up, you can.
There's some layering going on.
Yeah, it starts the game, and you may or may not realize it's actually running inside this Eon wrapper. So now that the sale is over on Steam, the game is going for $19.99. Now, pretty quickly, the Steam community blew up. So you can see the thread talking about how it's just a wrapped version of the Windows game, 424 threads long.
So I guess here's my thing. Like looking at this as someone that just likes to play games, right? Silly me. If it doesn't run well. I think that's the. I mean, that's the real thing. Does it like take a performance hit, like a noticeable performance?
Well,
hit?
yes and no. It runs if you have a pretty decent system. If you have,
just in general, even on Windows, that would be the case.
If you like on Windows, where it might be a little different is if you're not using NVIDIA, like you could use other video cards.
Okay.
This is pretty much only working for folks who are using the binary NVIDIA proprietary driver. And here's another thing: is if you don't have any single thread performance especially high, you're going to suffer because this wrapper limits the game to single CPU threading. So
that's legitimate complaint. Okay, now that's a big complaint actually.
That said, depending on your system, and I found I had better results after I did an NVIDIA graphics driver update. But depending on your system, you may get decent results. So here, I'll show you. I'll load a game I've been playing.
Take a look.
Here's a good one. This is just a good spot. Show you kind of the quality of the game. And now, so you might at this point you might not even realize, depending on how much you've read, you might not realize that you're playing something that's wrapped in a wine, or it's probably not accurate to call it a wine wrapper, but
a wrapper of sorts.
Depending on your system, if your computer is powerful enough, unless you read the outrage on the internet, you might not even be aware.
Okay.
You might actually
ignorance may be bliss in this case.
Yeah, you might actually think this is a native port. So I'll just since the audio listeners can't see it, I'll give you a quick tour. We'll go do a real quick combat, and you can see for me the performance of this game is absolutely playable. I've played about 2 hours or so. I'll just kill these guys real quick because I'm a badass, and then we'll get back to work.
Now, I don't know how it looks to you guys at home as far as the stream version is concerned, but here locally it looks fantastic.
Yeah, it
looks really good. I mean, just again, acknowledging the shortcomings that were mentioned previously, but.
Yeah, and so this is it's a role-playing game. It's you level up your guy. There's a RPG element to it that's pretty fun. There's a really good story. So for me, like enjoyment-wise, this has been one of the most enjoyable games I've played. Like just from a pure fun standpoint.
Right. Ignoring all the drama behind it.
Yes.
Okay.
And again, I also only paid $5.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If I was paying,
would you pay the full price for it?
I don't know if I'd pay $20 for a non-native game. I mean,
really?
I feel like that was okay a year or two ago, but now we are here in 2014. It is time to port your games natively, or just don't bother.
Right.
We've got plenty of other games now, and the chat room was discussing with me during the pre-show. We were talking about this, and the chat room said to me, it's like I think Mailhauler pointed out. He said, Chris, really, we're kind of looking at this the wrong way. I mean, a year ago, we just would have been thrilled to even have them target us. And now we're getting all uppity if it's not not done in the correct way, or if they're using the wrong development environment to do it. We should just be happy it's here. Yeah. And part of me does see it that way, but part of me also see it as but at the same time, they're not upfront that it's a wrapper, and they're taking my $20.
No, that's fair. I would definitely agree with you that they need to be very specific and clear with you as to, look, this is how we're doing this because it is not native. That I agree with.
This is the other thing is when you quit the game. Sorry to interrupt. Right now, it always thinks it's crashed when you quit the game.
Then they need to call it a work in progress.
It is very much a work in progress.
They need to have some disclaimers in place.
And
I support that.
You have the ATI and Intel drivers that aren't working very well.
Yeah, and they also need to bring the price point down because of that for this release. Now, that being said, with all those disclaimers of the things they need to do, and they do need to do those things, on the Linux user side, oh my God, guys, take a pill. Seriously.
Yeah, the outrage is high.
I mean, because, boy, people are sure excited to port games over to Linux so they can get reamed.
Well, and so there's also now starting to become a backlash of community members who are worried that this strong of a reaction will put off developers.
It would me. I wouldn't do it.
So now there's a second thread. It's not nearly as active as the original ranting thread, but there is a second thread now that is trying to sort of like, all right, well, instead of attacking the developers, let's work with the developers.
Right.
I think there's a couple of things the developers could have done to prevent this. Is number one, it sounds like there was poor communication between the company that made the port and the company that makes the game.
Oh, see, that's okay. That could happen, but still, there's no excuse for the company that made the game initially to allow something without disclaimers. That needed to happen.
And then also, I think it's worth pointing out that if they would have done maybe a public beta test,
right?
Even if it was a limited public beta test, a lot of people could have found this stuff. I think they really did extremely limited testing. They essentially ran it through, an API analyzer. They make the port.
Money grab.
They try it on like maybe an Ubuntu 12.04 installation with an NVIDIA card, and and I've also heard that there's just some distros the game doesn't even run on.
Ooh,
it just doesn't even start
and
for
that's
whatever
tough
reason.
after you just drop 20 bones on a game,
Yeah, at $5. It's a little more forgiving.
So
it's disappointing. But if you've got a decent rig, if you've maybe got a Core i7 and an NVIDIA card, an actual gaming computer, then you might actually be able to just play this game and have a great time. All of the controversy aside, I actually got a couple hours worth of enjoyment at $5 already. I already feel like I've gotten my money's worth out of this game. $20.
Well, and that's been my whole gripe with video games in general. No matter how you purchase them, no matter how far back you go, if it's on a computer, and even though the specs may allegedly work, sometimes you get screwed. I mean, it does happen.
Yeah.
Now, do I blame the developers for just shady and they're trying to get your money? No. Do I blame them for being careless? Absolutely. Careless, yes. Shady, no. Very careless, though. I think that they need to, as quickly as possible, remedy this so that they don't take a continued PR hit.
I think one thing that I don't know if it's necessarily a good stance is I think some folks in the community feel like, well, we have to beat them up for this to make sure that other developers don't pull this same stunt. And
try that in the retail environment and let me know how that works out for you.
Yeah, that doesn't usually work well.
It doesn't. No, it's crazy. It's bizarre. When you throw stuff at at the retail clerk, they're not real motivated to help you. It's weird. I get the angst and the anger, but just because you're behind a keyboard doesn't mean there's not someone on the other end that probably worked really hard on this and made some mistakes they need to be called out on. But don't be a dick.
My closing comments on this story are: I do worry that this could become a slightly more common thread if developers are targeting quote-unquote Steam OS, they're targeting a console, then in their minds, they might be viewing it as, if I can account for these 30 variables and make sure it works within these 30 variables, i.e. it is Steam OS console safe and compatible, I know it works on every shipping Steam OS console, then these type of wrappers might become a little easier for them to justify because they can kind of plan for that. And then those of us on just Wild West, good old Linux, not quote-unquote SteamOS, might have problems. And I don't want to see a whole bunch of Windows games coming over to Linux with these kind of wrappers.
No.
I guess I feel like maybe, they're not pricing it at the full $50. They're pricing it at $20. I think if you drop the price on this game and maybe if there was a way for Valve to label in the Steam store that this is not a truly native game, this is Linux compatible, but it is not Linux native. If there was a way for them to differentiate that, so as a consumer going in could just nope out and say, you know what, I'm not going to buy that if it's not Linux native. Or I could make the informed choice to say, you know what, this is just basically me having some mental jerk-off time. Why not? I'll do it.
Exactly. So, I mean, going back to my initial points, I definitely feel that, someone mentioned, well, I don't really feel they worked that hard on it because they did the wrapper stuff. I mean, if you're a developer, then you can speak to that. I don't know. I do believe that at some level, someone somewhere in the company probably had to pitch this to somebody to actually make that port happen. There was some work involved. I'm pretty sure it didn't just roll off a conveyor belt.
Yeah. It's disappointing.
But they did a sloppy job.
That's part of it, though. I mean, that's part of what's disappointing about it is they do go through the hassle and the time, and then they go off and say, oh, porting to Linux is so hard, we have to spend money and hire these third-party development shops, and then they do it wrong.
Exactly. And I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, if I was a developer, and I'm by no means a developer, if I'm a developer watching this, man, I would be like, screw you guys. Seriously, why would I bother?
I hope they look at it and go, okay, note to self, if we're going to port, we have to do the whole thing. We have to go, And honestly, that just might mean that we don't get a lot of older games. Because what development company is going to go spend, I don't know, $50,000, $60,000, whatever it would take to hire a developer for 6 months or whatever it would be to port that game? Who's going to spend that on a game that doesn't make a bunch of money anymore?
Exactly.
It's really going to be more about games that are in development that they can add Linux support to. And so we as the Linux community are probably going to either see a lot of these kind of wrapped ports for older games, or we're just not going to see older games moved over. And you just got to decide which one you prefer.
Well, and the real pain in the butt of it all is that, newsflash, it's designed to make money, not to entertain you. So, I mean, that's the big takeaway that a lot of people have to understand from a lot of game companies is that their goal is to earn a buck.
And they just want to make money.
Yeah, if they want to earn a buck off you, they're going to take, honestly, probably the path of least resistance. Again, I don't agree with it, but that's a consideration. So when they screw up like this, and believe me, they did, we have to really be cold and calculated as to how we call it to their attention. Be like, hey, glad you guys finally acknowledged we exist. However, here's a list of issues. Here's some suggestions. Let's try for an open beta next time. Let's get some patches out.
Yeah.
Let's rectify this because there's still an opportunity to recover from this.
This should be, if anything, right now, this should be their beta period.
Yeah, absolutely.
They should be like, yeah, I was just kidding. Mulligan. This is just beta.
And as far as the idea of it, is it false advertising? If it technically and just speaking literally, if it runs on Linux in any fashion, that's not false advertising. Sloppy, poorly done, bad thinking, bad across the board, foolish, whatever. Sure, but it's not false because it does technically run. It's not real. A lot of times you're dealing with people that don't really understand the community behind Linux, and so they literally say it's like, okay, look, they want a game on Linux here. There it is.
Here's another example of like a little bit of their buffoonery, though.
Oh, okay.
So minimum requirements are an Intel Core 2 Duo.
Oh, that I see that with a lot of games.
Recommended quad core Intel.
Yeah,
but it's a single threaded application,
and
so it can't take advantage of a quad core.
Yeah.
So why is that recommended? There's you don't the background processes,
and they should be called out on that. I completely agree with that. And to have that dialogue, be like, look, guys, come on. Maybe you really were that detached from the company doing the port from you, but you know
it does seem to be that might be the case. The other thing is, just to sort of wrap this up, is these guys got their start on the Mac. This is not a totally uncommon thing for the Mac side, so I wouldn't be too surprised to see it become a more common thing on the Linux side. However, there is an overall trend, thanks to like mobile and things like that, for OpenGL to sometimes become the target API that people write for. So it's possible that maybe as OpenGL sort of continues to rise, this will
hopefully so. But yes, definitely call them out on it, but do so like adults. Don't be a jerk.
So I want to shift gears and talk about Linus. Stop talking about gaming. He was interviewed by the Tech View.
Oh my!
By Bill Robinson, and I don't know if Bill was going off just like a pre-written interview script.
Oh wow!
Because
it's not uncommon.
I didn't pull a lot out of this interview, but I did notice a theme, and I liked Linus's response in just about every case. So he gets pretty close into it.
Okay.
He says to Linus, what really pisses you off in technology today? How and why does it make you angry? So then Linus responds, I wouldn't say that it makes me angry, but if there's something that that is distasteful in the tech market, it's the glorification of the most visible quote-unquote leaders. That very much includes me, by the way. I think the whole cult of personality is pretty disturbing, and I hate how people take me and what I say too seriously. The same goes for Jobs, Ellison, Gates, you name it. I wish more people thought for themselves and realized that technology actually froze from all of those random, anonymous great engineers that are all around.
Good point.
Great point. We've talked about the cult of personality in the open source community on Unplugged. Folks like Aaron Saigo have blogged about it. I think it's a major problem. I think, and I think also a lot of people might be rolling their eyes and be like, well, it's easy for Linus to say. Everybody, worships every word he says. However, having watched him for a while, like there was that recent Portland Linux Users Group conference that he went to. He specifically chose that because it was low-key, it was local, and he didn't have to have any prepared talk. He could just go to a Q&A with folks, and he wanted something simple.
Right.
And he didn't want something that was a big deal. And so I actually, having watched him, I do see that he doesn't. He's become more comfortable with that kind of position he has in the community. But I think he's always sort of presented a hey, I'm just a guy kind of an image. So of course, even though he just said, I think we need to stop glorifying people. The next question, one of the next questions is, who do you respect in technology today and why? And Torvald says, see my answer, ranting against the whole cult of personality. I'm just not all that impressed by the whole let's find a person and put him up on a pedestal thing. So rather than name individuals, I'd be much happier to point to things like the EFF or the organizations that try to not necessarily improve just their own lot in life, but they try to do something concrete to help make technology work better in the bigger picture.
Nice.
He says, on an individual level, I tend to like people who don't take themselves too seriously and play well at what they do. If I had to pick some well-known individual, I think Steve Wozniak kind of person is the kind that I'd prefer to be, and I guess that makes me respect him.
Yeah, no, I would actually agree with that in every sense of the word. Steve's actually pretty awesome.
Last question. I think I had one more in here that I thought was just kind of great because this guy is not dropping this thread. No. So then he says to Linus, who in your estimation are the most important people in technology today? Like the guy you can't get over.
It's a pre-written. I'm positive of it.
So Torvald says, I think it's a bit telling how a lot of technology is driven no longer by military or even commercial needs, obviously trying to avoid the personality question all over again, but by the consumer market. So I think the answer to your question is that I'm not, so far is that I'm concerned, what I think is the biggest and most important person in technology today is the user, aka the consumer. They're the most important person exactly because that is where the needs and the actual commercial success will stem from.
Well said.
Well said, Linus. Well said. I'm glad that he's speaking out about the whole cult of personality thing.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, it's good. It's good, but people need to think for themselves.
No,
too.
it's the reason why we have this Access Hollywood mentality to where everybody's got to see what the latest hoopla with whoever it is, and it's just get a life, guys. Come on.
Speaking of hoopla. Do you remember when I was all upset that Chrome was dropping GTK and switching to Aurora, their own toolkit? Well, that happened, and it pretty much, with a few exceptions, has gone pretty smooth. Not totally smooth.
No.
But it's out. It's here. Now Chrome on Linux as of version 35 is using, they've dropped GTK, they're using Aurora. You almost wouldn't even notice, except for you might have seen now you get the built-in notifications thingy, so you can get like some of your Google Now cards. And I guess there's some better GPU acceleration. I don't know if that's necessarily true.
That's the alleged talk anyway.
I'm sticking with it, and so far I'm liking it. However, there are a couple of gotchas.
Okay. If
you're using Pipelight with Chrome, you might not want to update to 35 because that's the version where Chrome has removed the NP API, the Netscape plugin API, which is what Pipelight was using to say enable Netflix playback in Chrome. And so that's busted. You can still do it in Firefox.
Yeah, I was going to say, and this is my advice in the long term. Honestly, just if you're going to be doing Pipelight anything, just keep it in Firefox. Make that your Pipelight box, if you will, and then just do everything else in Chrome. You're fine.
And then the other thing you'll have to start doing in Firefox now is the GNOME extension site, extensions.gnome.org. Is also
I discovered this here earlier.
Yes, I did too. Yeah, you can't install extensions. You have to use Firefox because also extensions.norm.org use that Netscape plugin API architecture. So there's things like that. If you had something that uses the Netflix API I used it for Netflix. If you had something that used the Netscape API, you're going to run into that. Overall, it didn't go nearly as bad as I thought it would.
No, not so far, but still, Google.
Google, but I'll take it. I'm using it. It's working for me, so I'll stick with it for now. I switched to Firefox for a bit. I do like the new Firefox. I think it's have you tried the new Firefox?
No, I do have it installed. It's just not a
it's nice. It feels a little, to me it feels a little faster.
Yeah,
I feel like it's a little quicker.
It definitely pops up nice.
That's true. The switch to Aurora has nothing to do with the Netscape API plugin breakage chat room's pointing out. It just happened at the same time. They just rolled all that out.
However it worked, whyever it worked, just use Firefox and who cares?
There you go. That solves the problem. And then I use Chrome for like my general web browsing, and then Firefox for certain tasks now, and it's great at that.
That's kind of what I've been doing that for a long time, and it's worked well for me in that I can just split off my tasks depending on what I'm doing. Anything legacy based that's like just real, like Netflix is a good example. I kind of keep that in Firefox. Seems to work okay.
Word, Matt.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all the news for this week. It's time to talk with Jonathan Thomas from the OpenShot project. But first, before we get to that, I want to thank our segment sponsor, System 76.
Yeesh.
Creators of machines born to run Linux. If you're going to do any production work, don't bother fighting with your machine. Just go right over to System76.com and look at that Leopard Extreme. I have punished that thing in a production workload, and I have to tell you, it never once disappointed. You should go watch our episode on this if you haven't seen some of the things we did to this machine. And it's water-cooled, too, so you know that CPU is never going to get too hot when you're doing all them bitty encodings. Go over to System76.com and get yourself a machine. And tell them the Linux Action Show sent you.
That's right.
Matt, I am super thrilled to welcome Jonathan Thomas to the Linux Action Show, the founder, the lead developer of OpenShot. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So I think, people might be familiar. I want to back up a little bit just in case they're not. They're probably familiar with the OpenShot project, a video editor that's been available for Linux now for years. I think the most commonly deployed version right now is version 1.4. But folks might remember that you did a crowdfunding campaign to launch development of the next version. And how has that gone?
I figured that would be the first question y'all would ask. But first, did y'all see my nice Linux action?
Nice. Represented.
Yes. And, of course,
awesome.
we are rocking our OpenShot shirts here, too. So
I noticed y'all looked extra sharp today.
It's funny how that worked out so well. So, yes, thank you. And I like your shirt. Well done. These shirts came from the crowdfunding you did, didn't they?
These are the same shirts that I sent out to the backers on Kickstarter.
So how has all that gone? It's been what? Has it been a year now, or
it's been just over a year. And honestly, it's a lot more work than I initially anticipated.
Oh, I bet.
Sure.
And partially I like to blame Windows for that because it's been a nightmare.
Always good.
But no, it's been a lot of fun, and Kickstarter is something I've never tried to do before, and that was a learning experience all on its own. So
Yeah.
But now I'm back to the stuff that I'm actually good at, which is programming, and so that's nice to get back to programming, and I'm just trying to get it done now.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure it's a massive undertaking. And I guess maybe we could start there. I don't think a lot of people are aware of what it takes to make a video editor for Linux. What is something that people might not realize is there more stuff underlying that you can utilize than you expected? Is there less that needs things created from whole cloth? What's that situation like?
Well, the video decoding is probably the most well-supported, stack of software on Linux, and same with Windows and Mac. So it's not that I have to figure out how to do video encoding, so to speak, but it's everything else. Everything else is not supported. So the massive amounts of parallel image processing is a challenge. Just the stability of the build tools to get it to compile on Windows, Mac, and Linux was a challenge that I had never done before. So that was probably the biggest challenge.
Right. Yeah, I would imagine so. And so, are you essentially retooling the whole application to make it cross-platform like this? How is that working?
Well, when I started the Kickstarter campaign, my initial idea was just to retool the existing interface with a better library underneath the hood.
Yeah.
But it quickly turned out that the GTK interface, that whole system, did not port very nicely to Windows and Mac, and it looked horrible. And so it's been a frustration this entire time trying to work with GTK. So,
but isn't OpenShot kind of known as a GNOME video editor?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, when I think of OpenShot, I think of it as an editor that's integrated with the GNOME desktop. It seems like GTK is kind of a hard requirement, isn't it?
Oh, well, yeah, if it's going to be a GNOME desktop application. But
right.
To bring it natively to Mac and Windows and to improve upon a lot of our user interface elements, we started looking more and more at the Qt framework, which I call Qt, but I was corrected recently that
I still call it Qt.
We still call it Qt. Or Qt, yeah. Qt's hard. It's hard.
So I'm using the Qt framework.
Yeah.
And that framework is really, really good. The only problem I've had with it is that I'm using the version 5, which is not as well, deployed and supported everywhere. So that's been a bit of a challenge too, is trying to embrace, new things that aren't necessarily supported across the entire ecosystem.
So I wanted to the reason why I'm kind of where I'm angling at with some of this is, in a way, you were kind of early in here is a fairly well-known open source project, and I want to go to the community for funding to take it to the next level. You're one of my first examples when I think of a well-established project doing that. And so I think it's interesting to kind of check in with you so that way other open source projects that might consider going down this route know about these things to think about. Because one of the other things that I imagine has been hard to struggle with is sort of properly updating folks on what the snags are and what the progress is. I've noticed you do have a development blog, but sometimes there's long periods between updates. And I have to imagine, as somebody who's trying to run the crowdfunding and trying to manage the development, it almost seems like it's impossible to also then keep a whole website up to date with where things are at. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the biggest challenge, is I wear so many different hats. So if I have my crowdfunding hat on, I'm on Kickstarter and I'm blogging. If I have my community manager hat, I'm out there trying to help other people get the stack building and get them to integrate it into the process. If I'm my developer hat, which I wear the most, then I'm just in code all the time, and it's hard to take breaks and keep everybody updated. That's a definite challenge, though.
That seems like it could become overwhelming, and I have to also wonder, is the scope of trying to develop a full-featured video editor for Linux, is that sometimes just the concept and the scope of that ambition sometimes overwhelming for you?
I wouldn't say it's overwhelming. I think all the various, it's really time that's overwhelming. I still love every day that I work on it. It's just I know people are thirsty for information and they want this thing done. So that's
right.
Probably time is the biggest constraint that I can't control. It just takes as long as it takes.
Right.
So when you look at like, whenever it is, maybe it's a couple of years down the road, maybe it's not, where this is, OpenShot 2 is out, maybe 2.1, maybe it's like we've had some time with it now. What is missing in the Linux video editing landscape? So now OpenShot's here. It's provided us with a new updated cross-platform editor. Development is now kind of occurring at a set pace because we've reached 2.0. But what's missing? What's the missing picture for video editing on Linux?
Well, one of the big things that OpenShot 2.0 is bringing is the improved animation support. So a lot of what you're going to see once this finally does hit and we start releasing betas is a lot of interfaces around animating things, whether it's keyframing, titling, or green screen animation, even like animating. I mean, everything can be animated in OpenShot 2.0, and it's a real cool system. So that's probably the biggest feature from OpenShot 1.x that's missing is animation, which I'm addressing. But the next big feature I would like to tackle is rotoscoping.
Yeah, wow.
And I would very much like the ability to use, a Wacom tablet and easily rotoscope, which is basically just, drawing on video, for those who don't know. But frame by frame, just be able to go in and draw in lightsabers and laser beams and erase people's eyeballs, just creepy stuff like that.
That would be so cool.
You seem to be pretty aware of it's not just a straight, linear video editor that we need, but we also need to be able to do some sort of effect generations and titling and effects like that, which has always been kind of my sticking point is people have asked me about, well, Chris, couldn't you switch to Lightworks? And it's like, yeah, you could do Lightworks for the basic editing, but there's still all these other components you're missing, like lower third capabilities and titles and proper transitions. And so why don't we shift gear and start talking about OpenShift 2, because I got a couple of questions that came in from some longtime fans of the show, Che and Linda Dean, who edit every single day in OpenShot for their gerbs, for their day gerbs. And so they had a couple questions. So Che wrote, I use OpenShot as my main editor. The only parts that really get me are when I need to add titles and credits. It just feels a bit overly complex. Are there any plans to overhaul this UI while at the same time keeping the editing tracks as they are?
Yeah, so in OpenShot 2.0, we have an entirely new title system. It's much easier. It takes a lot less clicks. One of the reasons we did, the credits, scrolling credits from bottom to top.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that it's so clunky in OpenShot 1.x is because of the library that we use. It can't load images that are much, much larger than the screen.
Right.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Anyway, so we end up having to kind of cut them into a piece that scrolls up and then another piece that scrolls up and another piece, and it kind of ends up being overly complex. But that's one of the first things we did with OpenShot 2.0 is improve that capability. So we can now open up humongous pictures and animate them smoothly, scrolling up and including, I say picture, but everything's really a picture, right, when it comes to the screen.
Yeah.
But that includes text and fonts and things like that.
All right, so the follow-up question from the Dean clan was, will the updates include the ability to easily insert a photo into a title? So she loves the advanced editor, but it can get pretty complicated pretty quickly to the uninitiated, and so I think she's thinking like a picture in there, that kind of stuff. How's that looking?
Well, it's already pretty easy to, drop a picture, and most of our titles are transparent, so it's not hard to put a title on top of pictures already. But yeah, I'm not sure. That one sounds a bit quirky, but
yeah. All right, so I wanted to ask you the hard question that you honestly don't have to have an answer for, because there just really might not be one. But when's a guy like me gonna get his hands on a beta for OpenShot 2.0? What do you got? Any kind of rough timelines on when general public might see that kind of stuff?
I wanted it done last year, just like
sure.
everybody.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
So I'll answer that in two phases. Number one, a lot of questions I get on my blog are related to the closed development of OpenShot 2.0, since it's not all been published out to the open source repositories.
Right.
And I just first wanted to respond to that. And
yeah, please.
Every single person who contacts me that wants to be involved in the project, I get them involved and get them the source code. So my first request would be, if anyone's out there that wants to help and see it done as quickly as possible, then I'm more than happy to spend time with people, integrate them into the project and give them all the source code. And we have source control servers, we have everything set up. And so we have about, I would say, 10 people right now that are helping me with OpenShot 2.0. And so anybody that wants to get involved is more than happy to. Number two, when will it be released? I really don't have a great answer. Every time I've set a date, it's kind of blown up in my face.
I understand.
To something silly like an icon not showing up in Windows or something, dumb like that. But it will definitely be this year, and preferably it'll be well before the end of the year. That's as good as I can give right now.
I get you. So it sounds like you have a pretty good. I mean, a team of 10 is not too shabby, really, to be honest with you. Now, how much of that is actual code being laid down by that team? How much is?
Pretty much all of it right now.
Really?
Well, one person's helping us with the packaging, and that's been a tremendous help. So this is someone that's very talented at, not only Linux packaging, but Mac and Windows packaging. And that's a whole nother, project in itself, trying to package this kind of crazy stuff up.
How important is it to OpenShot that it be available to other platforms? Because it seems like some people have thought, oh, he's abandoning Linux. He's going to move away from Linux because he can't get the traction there. Is it about that, or is it about something else?
No, I mean, OpenShot will always be a Linux editor first. That's what I use. That's my daily operating system. I can't imagine switching to a different operating system at this point. So, but what I want to do is, my goal is I want to get OpenShot as to many people as possible, and I want to have as many developers helping as possible. And to do that, I need to expand it to, just like Firefox, just like Chrome, just like VLC, and any number of other, well-established open source projects. I need to expand the tent, so to speak. I need to have as many people that want to get involved in it.
It makes it, as an editor, it makes it a more practical tool, actually. If I know that if I need to spend the week on a Windows box for some crazy reason, I can still get access to the tool that I use to do my job. So I actually think it's a great thing, even if I would 98% of the time use it under Linux. All right, so you mentioned you use Linux every single day. So as we kind of wrap up here, and then we'll touch on anything else you wanted to mention, but I just got to ask you one of my last questions. What is your daily Linux desktop? What's your daily driver? What's it look like? What kind of distro is it? Laptop, desktop? Tell us a little bit about it.
I use like 3 different computers every day, depending on where I am.
I hear you.
So I have a laptop that runs Ubuntu 13.10. It's a pretty normal stack with Unity and Eclipse and some of those kind of tools. It's nothing crazy looking. My home computer, I run the GNOME shell, which I like a lot too. Good man. But anyway, I mean, it's effectively the same stack. I stay with Ubuntu for the most part, and I try to keep it updated as much as I can without destroying myself.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jonathan, is there anything else you want to touch on or let folks know? Just kind of like, if you wanted to do like a little update, you're welcome to. If there's anything you want to touch on before we go.
I would just tell everybody that things are coming really good with OpenShot 2.0, and I feel like there's finally a lot of the Kickstarter stuff is behind me, and a lot of software development is now happening every day, and so that makes me happy.
That's awesome.
There's a big update coming. I was going to do it yesterday, but it didn't quite happen. So this weekend, for sure, I'll have some screencasts of OpenShot 2.0, and so I'll finally be releasing some videos of what the timeline looks like, which I'm pretty excited about. So
that'll be coming out a little bit after this episode's out, it sounds like. So where should folks go to catch all of that? What would be the best destinations to follow that kind of stuff?
Facebook. Really, I try to push out all my news to every source I have. But
you have an official OpenShot editor page on Google+, and you have a Twitter account.
That's a good page. OpenShot.org, OpenShotVideo.com, Facebook/OpenShot, Twitter, Google+, whatever.
I will try to put links to all of that in the show notes so people can just pick the one they like the most, and they can keep up to date on where OpenShot's at. Because, it's something we follow here on the show because we're obviously heavy into video, and OpenShot is there's other options out there. OpenShot is the one that I'm holding out for, and I'm looking forward to using the most. So can't wait to try my beta.
One quick question for you. I wanted to know, any idea of you considering doing a plug-in development situation, maybe in a 3.0 release? Obviously 2.0 is already spoken for.
So people could write plugins for OpenShot?
We're talking like 3-4 years down the road, obviously, but something where people can actually then begin to build off of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly on the radar. It's not currently built in.
No, of course not. That'd be a huge undertaking. Yeah.
The only plug-in architecture I have right now is the audio system I'm using is a complete plug-in architecture.
Oh, okay.
And so that one actually uses the same plug-in model that Audacity does and some other tools like that. So that will support plugins that are pretty cool. On the video side, I made it where plugins are very, effects are very easy to write.
Nice.
But they're not they're not loaded from a DLL. You know, they're not loaded dynamically right now.
Gotcha.
So that would be a good enhancement.
One feature request: if we could get a matrix drop thing,
cool.
I would be so happy.
The matrix effect.
It used to be. I forget what the app was. It was an old Linux app that had it as part of the effects that you could do that. If we could do something like that, that would be so cool.
Oh man,
totally
that's awesome.
That would be awesome.
That would be awesome.
And also another often requested thing is image stabilization, which I'm looking into. But that's a whole nother that's a whole nother world as well.
That sounds like a 3.0 kind of thing.
That's probably on the future radar.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, great update. It's great to check in with you. Maybe once 2.0 is a little closer, maybe we can have you on again and get an update.
Yeah.
Would you be up for that?
Yeah, I'd be totally up for that.
Very good.
Cool.
Very right on, sir. Well, keep up the great work. It was great to chat with you, and we'll keep an eye out for those updates. And have a great rest of your weekend.
Appreciate it.
All right, you too.
Thanks.
And that brings us to the end of this week's Linux Action Show. But Matt,
Yes.
before we get out of here, I wanted to cover a little bit of feedback. Now, this week, I'm going to be honest with you. I was playing a little bit too much of The Witcher 2, so I didn't get a chance to catch up on all the emails, so we'll double down and Unplugged on Tuesday. But I did notice in the subreddit a couple of cool projects that were linked this week that I wanted to share with the wider LAS audience. So the first one came from Pinky Poo J.
Cool.
Pink Poo J, actually.
Okay. Hey.
As in not Pinky, but as in Poo. He says, I built and I wonder if he realized I would spend that much time on his name when he...
Undoubtedly.
Yeah. He says, I built a door opener for my university computer club using a Raspberry Pi.
Nice.
It uses a servo that controls to open the door. Authentication is done using a USB mag strip reader with Python scripts on the back end. The string is stored on the credit card as hash and then stored in the database along with the owner's name, including a green and red LED for indicating access. It has two 1/8 mono jacks that hook up to the door sensor modules.
Wow.
Uses two power supplies via DC jacks, which he wired. Here's the gallery, Matt. Look at this.
Oh my God.
Have you seen anything like this when it comes to...
This is the kind of stuff I want to do in my home office, but my wife won't let me.
Yeah. So
it's an aesthetic nightmare. But
swipe. You see, there's the door swiper right there.
So
you swipe your
awesome.
card. When access is granted, the Raspberry Pi kicks off the servo, which turns the doorknob and unlocks the door, and there's the computer right there.
I want one.
That's what he
I
built.
want the whole package. I want it done for me, plug and play.
This is so nerdy and
so cool.
Exactly the kind of thing I never have the motivation to do, but always dream of.
Oh yeah, I would. Oh, I don't have the patience for it, but I'd love to own one.
Like, I would love to have all of the JB1 doors here in the JB1 facilities to just be powered by Raspberry Pis.
I'd be satisfied with a wave file that sounds like a Star Trek door opening.
Yeah, actually, viewer Seth sent me a door chime that you put next to the door from ThinkGeek that when you go through it goes.
That's awesome.
All right, now here's one that came in from Professor Chaos 64. He calls it Retro Rig, and I thought this was so cool too. He says, I started a personal project on May 4th. In case my retro gaming PC ever went down, I wanted to have all my configs, setup, and packages saved away. So those who have configured things like emulators, like Moopin 64 Plus without the Python front end will understand my concern. What grew eventually is something I'm calling Retro Rig, a dialogue-based installer script to jumpstart Ubuntu 14.04 into a retro console. So it's a combination of Ubuntu, XBMC, and RCB, which is the ROM collection browser.
Wow.
Here's its current features of this script. It auto-installs software emulator configs and all of the required components. It sets up 4-player wireless Xbox driver userland module, and it activates the init script so it starts at boot. It has preset controller mappings for the 360 controller, save state, load state, exit emulators with the Xbox 360 per game, cobbled together first run state of RCB, functions to update via Git repo, emulator binaries, automatically start XBMC at login, a ROM loader, and loading options for installs with the progress bars as the script goes. He's included a link to his GitHub repo where he has it posted, and also some things.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I'd love to see some video of this.
So you run this bad boy, and it turns an Ubuntu 14.04 machine into essentially a kick-butt retro gaming console.
I would like it.
So good work, Professor Chaos 64. And if you guys want to check that out, we have a link to that thread in the show notes, and you can go find the link to his GitHub account where you can pull down the script right there. Give it a go. Maybe just try it in a VM, and if it works, then try it in a machine hooked up to your TV. What's going to go wrong, huh?
Exactly.
What? You too good for XBMC?
Exactly.
Give it a go.
Give it a go.
Don't be a jerk.
Change your life, you know.
All right, so on Linux Unplugged, episode 41 of this week, we asked the audience, what desktop environment do you use? Because we were going over just overall stats and stuff. I'm going to go, I don't know if I've voted yet, so I'm going to vote for Gnome Shell if I haven't.
Just to be safe.
All right. Oh, I did already vote.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I thought I might have on Tuesday. So let's look at the results, Matt, and see where they're at. And then this will be linked and embedded in the show notes. We'd like to ask the Linux Action Show audience to go over and vote if you didn't catch Linux Unplugged this week, because we're just trying to get an idea of what our Linux desktop users, what they run. So here's the results. 22% of the votes, GNOME Shell. 21% of the votes, KDE. 15% of the votes, Unity. Then XFCE, followed by Cinnamon.
Interesting.
And then a Tiling Window Manager comes in at number 6, Made at number 8, Pantheon, number 9, Screw Desktop Environments, just the shell, with 7 votes. 618 total votes. If you guys would go over to the show notes and vote, and I'll also I'll toss a link in the show notes, or I'm sorry, I'll toss a link in the chat room right now as we go. Matt, did you know we do this show live every single Sunday?
Live. Who'd have thought?
And you can see we have a chat room, and I'm like chatting with them and stuff about stuff. I'm giving them links to straw polls. They're yelling at us. They're helping name the show with their bang suggests. And all you got to do is just show up Sunday around probably 9:30 a.m. Pacific. Go to jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar to get that converted to your local time zone and hang out with us on the live show. It's like more show. It's like even better show. It's like double the show.
It's more.
Yeah, and don't you want more? What's the matter with you?
With more.
What's the matter with you?
Hey, sir, may I have some more?
Oh, Matt, you guys played a little Battle Block Theater on Geek and the Gamer. Good game. What'd you think?
Well, first thing he discovered is that you could explode yourself by farting, so that was kind of cool.
That's a hit, right?
That was used quite frequently. Actually.
Did you enjoy it, or was it too campy?
We really enjoyed it. We need to get a second controller so we can both play.
Yeah.
But he's been really, I mean, like he's literally wanting to do like a show after show after show. So we got like a catalog of
nice
pre-recorded stuff.
So go check out Geek and the Gamer on YouTube, youtube.com/Geek and the Gamer. That's a show that Matt does. And it's a screencast gaming show, and it's just a lot of fun to watch. And if you've been curious about some of these games, you'd be surprised how fun it is to actually watch people play games. I know it sounds weird, but
true.
It's actually
all the games we play, either wine or native. 98 to 99% of them are native games. Occasionally a wine game, but for the most part, this game here, native.
Matt,
Steam.
I have a question for you. Let's just say I'm sitting around, I'm like, that wasn't enough Matt Hartley. Where would I go to maybe read a little more Matt Hartley?
Datamation.com. Scroll down to open source, or you can actually click the link and just go straight to everything I wrote.
Boom.
Based on author.
Right there. And of course, you can also catch more of Matt and myself on Linux Unplugged. Right. We just did episode 41, Arches Uprising. The title's maybe a little more grandiose than the content, but we did discuss major trends we're seeing in Linux usage. We looked at some data we have. We looked at some data that was conducted on r/Linux and some other things, put it all together, and boom, had ourselves a discussion. I thought it was a pretty fun episode. Definitely. Episode 41 just came out, and we will be recording episode 42 on Tuesday. We'd love to have you join us live. Again, jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar always has those details. And last but not least, we'd love to have your feedback. Go to jupiterbroadcasting.com and click the contact link. Choose Linux Action Show or Linux Unplugged from the drop-down and send in your thoughts into those boxes that we provide. And then what we have on the back end is those robots take it up, they package it, and they deliver it to the host using jetpacks. So probably
can't get any easier.
If you like robots and you like jetpacks and you like our shows, we'd love to have your feedback. So just go over there and click that contact link, and we'd like to hear your ideas because we always incorporate that into our shows and linuxactionshow.reddit.com, the subreddit, also where you can give feedback. You can submit stories, vote them up or down. We'll have discussion threads for each individual episode. If you have something you just want to comment on that episode, maybe make a correction. We love getting those too. We'll have a thread in the subreddit, linuxactionshow.reddit.com.
Good stuff,
all right,
guys.
I think we're all done. So thanks so much for tuning this week's episode of the Linux Action Show. We'll see you right back here next week. Bye. Hey, if you haven't noticed, the show notes kick ass. So heads up, visit the show notes, would you? Hey, go visit the show notes, would you? They kick ass. Jeez.
I had a dream I was trapped in Schoolhouse Rock last night. It was the weirdest thing. I'm just an executive order.
That is weird. I'm just going to be honest with you.
It was the 2014 version, so there's a little more explosions and.
Ting is mobile. That makes ting is mobile. That makes sense. Ting is mobile. That makes sense. Go to last.ting.com.